If you like sci-fi stories, please like or subscribe to help our channel grow. Enjoy this story.
Echoes of the Vanguard. The jungle's air was thick, heavy with moisture, and alive with the buzzing of unseen creatures. Lieutenant Zara Chase adjusted her oxygen filter as she pushed through the dense foliage. Each step was met with resistance. The tangle of roots and vines seemed intent on slowing her down. She glanced at her wrist-mounted tracker, its blinking light a lone beacon in the green expanse. "Are you sure about this, Lieutenant?" asked Sergeant Malik, his voice muffled through his comms. He followed closely, his boots crunching on the undergrowth. The last drone scan showed movement about a kilometer north. Could be hostile. Zara paused, brushing sweat-soaked hair from her forehead. It could also be the Vanguard. If we're going to bring them home, we need to find them first. Malik didn't respond, but Zara could sense his unease. It mirrored her own. The Vanguard wasn't just any squadron. They were legends back on Earth, heroes of the first wave of military expeditions to this alien world, Genera 6. That was, until they disappeared. Declared a wall, they'd become a ghost story among recruits. Rumors of mutiny and madness swirled around their name. Now, 3 years later, Zara's mission was simple: find them, assess the situation, and reintegrate them into the fold, or if necessary, neutralize the threat. She tried not to think too hard about that last part. As they pushed deeper into the jungle, Zara caught sight of their guide, Liana, perched on a low branch ahead. The alien woman moved with a grace that seemed impossible for her lithe frame. Her translucent skin shimmered faintly in the filtered sunlight, and her large, opalescent eyes flicked toward Zara. "You move too loud," Liana said, her voice soft but clear. She dropped to the ground with barely a sound, her bare feet brushing the mossy earth. "The jungle hears you." "The jungle hears us?" Malik muttered under his breath. Zara shot him a warning glance. Liana had proven invaluable so far, guiding them through terrain that would have been impossible to navigate otherwise. Zara wasn't about to alienate their only ally on this planet, alien or otherwise. "What's ahead?" Zara asked, keeping her tone professional. Liana tilted her head, listening to something Zara couldn't hear. Her fingers brushed the bark of a nearby tree, and for a moment it seemed to hum beneath her touch. "They are close, but they are changed." The words sent a chill down Zara's spine. "Changed how?" Before Liana could answer, a sudden roar echoed through the trees. Zara instinctively dropped into a crouch, her hand on her sidearm. Malik had his rifle up in a heartbeat, scanning the canopy for movement. "Stay calm," Liana said, though her wide eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. "It is not for us." Zara's mind raced. She'd read the reports. Genera 6 was home to an array of dangerous fauna, none of which had been fully cataloged. Still, the roar felt more than animal. It carried an edge of something unnatural. "We should move," Liana said, already stepping into the shadows of the trees. "Quickly." They found the Vanguard's camp at dusk. It was hidden in a clearing surrounded by towering trees whose bark glowed faintly in the dim light. The camp itself was a patchwork of earth tech and jungle materials. Metallic shelters overgrown with moss, solar panels partially obscured by creeping vines. Zara counted at least a dozen figures moving among the structures. They were armed, but their uniforms were tattered, their once pristine armor caked with mud and plant matter. Some of them moved with the precision of trained soldiers, others with a feral unpredictability that set her nerves on edge. "They look like a bunch of warlords," Malik muttered, lowering his binoculars. "They look like survivors," Zara corrected, though she couldn't deny the unsettling vibe of the place. She straightened her shoulders. "Stay here. I'll make contact." "You sure about that?" Malik asked. "She is sure," Liana interjected. Her voice was quiet, but there was a note of finality in it. "They will not harm her. Yet." Zara chose not to dwell on that last word as she stepped into the clearing, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. Conversations halted, and all eyes turned to her. "Lieutenant Zara Chase," she announced, her voice steady despite the weight of their stares. "I've come to speak with Colonel Elias Grayson." For a moment, no one moved. Then a man stepped forward. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his once sharp features softened by years in the jungle. His piercing blue eyes, however, were as sharp as ever. "I'm Grayson," he said, his voice gravely, "and you've come a long way to find us." Over the next hour, Zara sat across from Grayson in what passed for a command tent. The space was dimly lit by bioluminescent orbs strung from the ceiling, their light casting eerie shadows on the walls. Grayson leaned back in his chair, studying her with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "So," he said, breaking the silence, "Earth finally decided we're worth their time again?" "It's not like that," Zara replied, choosing her words carefully. "We thought you were lost. When we picked up your signal, Command sent me to bring you home." "Home," Grayson repeated, the word heavy with derision. "You think Earth is home? Take a look around, Lieutenant. This is our home now." Zara frowned. "You've been here too long, Colonel. You've lost perspective." "And you've never had it," he shot back, his voice rising. "You don't understand what this place is, what it's capable of." "What's that supposed to mean?" Zara asked, leaning forward. Grayson's gaze darkened. "It means you're playing a game you don't understand, and if you're not careful, it'll chew you up and spit you out." Later that night, as Zara lay in her temporary quarters, a makeshift tent on the outskirts of the camp, she replayed Grayson's words in her mind. There was something he wasn't telling her, something that went beyond simple desertion. The jungle seemed alive around her, its sounds a constant backdrop. Zara couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, not just by the Vanguard, but by the jungle itself. In the distance, a low hum rose and fell, almost like a heartbeat. She closed her eyes, willing herself to sleep. But even as exhaustion pulled her under, a single thought lingered in her mind. What had the Vanguard become? The morning came not with a sunrise, but with the faint glow of bioluminescent plants shifting from blue to green, casting an otherworldly hue across the camp. Zara emerged from her tent, blinking away the remnants of restless dreams. The air was cooler now, carrying a faint, almost metallic tang that clung to her senses. Grayson was waiting for her. He stood by a cluster of what looked like cobbled-together surveillance equipment, Earth tech, but modified with local materials. He gestured for her to follow him without a word, leading her down a narrow path deeper into the jungle. Malik and Liana appeared from the shadows, falling into step beside her. Zara raised an eyebrow at the alien guide. "Didn't take you for a morning person," she said. Liana's lips twitched into something that might have been a smile. "The jungle does not sleep. Neither do I. Not fully." "Charming," Malik muttered. Grayson stopped abruptly ahead of them, turning to face the group. "You'll want to see this," he said, gesturing toward a clearing just beyond the trees. "But prepare yourself. It's not what you think." The clearing was unlike anything Zara had seen. Massive tree-like structures rose from the ground, their trunks pulsating with faint rhythmic light. They were translucent, their interiors filled with twisting, vein-like tendrils that seemed to move of their own accord. Around the base of each structure, the earth was scorched black, the air tinged with an acrid electric charge. "Is that biotech?" Zara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Grayson nodded. "That's what they called it back on Earth. We just call it the core." "The core?" Malik echoed. "What the hell does it do?" Grayson's jaw tightened. "It grows, it learns, and it connects. When we first found it, we thought it was just another alien oddity, but it's more than that. Much more." Zara stepped closer, her gaze locked on the strange, pulsating structures. "Are you saying this thing is alive?" "Alive and aware," Liana said quietly. She had moved to stand beside Zara, her expression unreadable. "The core is the heart of this world. It speaks to those who listen." Zara turned to Grayson, her unease growing. "And you've been listening?" "For years," he admitted. "At first, it was just whispers, flashes of understanding. But the longer we stayed, the more it revealed. This jungle, this planet, it's not just a place. It's an organism, a single interconnected entity, and we're a part of it now." Zara stared at him, trying to process his words. "You've bonded with it. That's why you've refused to leave." Grayson's gaze hardened. "We didn't refuse. We were abandoned. Earth left us here, Lieutenant. They didn't care what happened to us. So we adapted. We survived. And now we thrive." Zara opened her mouth to argue, but stopped when she noticed Malik's hand on his weapon, his eyes scanning the clearing. "Lieutenant, we've got movement," he said, his voice tense. From the shadows of the jungle, figures began to emerge. At first, Zara thought they were more of Grayson's soldiers, but as they stepped into the light, it became clear they were something else entirely. Their forms were humanoid, but their skin was veined with the same glowing tendrils as the core. Their eyes shone with an unnatural light, and their movements were both fluid and unsettlingly precise. "What are they?" Zara whispered. "Symbiotes," Grayson said, his tone matter-of-fact. "Humans who fully integrated with the core." "Fully integrated?" Malik's voice rose. "You mean they're not human anymore?" "They're more than human," Grayson replied. "Stronger, faster, better adapted to this world." Zara's stomach churned. She turned to Liana. "Did you know about this?" Liana hesitated, her gaze flickering between Zara and the symbiotes. "I suspected. The core is powerful. It changes those who accept it." "This is wrong," Zara said, stepping back. "Whatever you've become, this isn't what Earth sent you here for. You've gone rogue, Grayson." "You've... rogue?" Grayson cut her off, his voice rising. "We didn't choose this, Lieutenant. Earth made us expendable. They knew what this planet was, and they sent us anyway. We've just done what they couldn't, adapted." Before Zara could respond, one of the symbiotes stepped forward. It tilted its head, its glowing eyes fixed on her. For a moment, it seemed to study her, as though assessing something unseen. Then it spoke. "She is not ready." The voice was distorted, layered with an echo that didn't seem to come from its mouth. Zara took an involuntary step back, her pulse racing. "Not ready for what?" she demanded. The symbiote turned to Grayson. "She must choose. Cross it, I." Grayson's expression softened, almost pitying. "You don't understand yet, Lieutenant, but you will. The core doesn't just change us, it reveals the truth about this planet, about Earth, about everything." Zara shook her head, her instincts screaming at her to run, but as she glanced at Liana and Malik, both of whom were watching her with tense anticipation, she realized she wasn't ready to abandon them, or the answers she'd come to find. "I'm not choosing anything," she said firmly. "Not until I know the whole truth." Grayson's lips curled into a faint smile. "Then you'd better start listening." As the day wore on, Zara found herself drawn deeper into the Vanguard's world. Grayson showed her the modifications they'd made to their technology, blending Earth's engineering with the jungle's natural resources. He spoke of their growing connection to the core, how it had helped them survive the harsh conditions of Genera 6. But the more Zara saw, the more questions she had. Why had Earth abandoned the Vanguard? What was the core's true purpose? And why did she feel like the jungle itself was watching her every move? That night, as she sat by a small fire with Malik and Liana, she voiced her concerns. "They're hiding something," she said, her voice low. "Grayson talks like he's found enlightenment, but there's more to it. Something darker." Malik nodded. "No kidding. Those symbiotes gave me the creeps. Whatever they've done to themselves, it's not natural." Liana's gaze flicked toward the trees, her expression unreadable. "The core is not evil, but it is not kind either. It does what it must to survive, just like we do." "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" Zara asked, exasperated. "It is supposed to make you understand," Liana replied. "This world is not like yours. It has no borders, no masters. Only connections. If you wish to survive here, you must see it as it is." Zara stared at the fire, her thoughts racing. She didn't know what the truth was yet, but one thing was certain. Genera 6 was far more than just an alien jungle. It was alive, intelligent, and playing a game she didn't yet understand. And she was caught in the middle of it. The fire crackled softly, its light dancing over Zara's face as she sat lost in thought. Every conversation with Grayson and every moment in the jungle left her with more questions than answers. It wasn't just the Vanguard or the core, it was everything about this planet. Genera 6 didn't just exist, it thrived with an intelligence and interconnectedness that defied anything she'd ever known. "We need a plan," she said finally, breaking the silence. "We can't just sit here and let this play out." Malik snorted. "A plan for what? Grayson's gone native. The Vanguard's half-turned into glowing super soldiers, and the jungle's alive. What's the endgame here, Lieutenant?" Zara turned to him, her eyes sharp. "The endgame is answers. We need to figure out what the core really wants, and why Earth left them here to rot." "And how do you plan to do that?" Malik asked. "Ask it nicely?" "I might," Zara replied, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. "But first, I'm going to start with Grayson." Liana, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "Grayson will not tell you everything. He believes in the core now more than he believes in you or Earth." Then I'll make him believe in me, Zara said, standing. You two stay here. I'll be back. Grayson was in what passed for the camp's command center, studying a holographic map projected from a battered piece of Earth tech. The map was overlaid with glowing tendrils that pulsed in sync with the jungle's faint hum. Zara stepped into the room, her presence immediately noticed. You don't sleep much, do you? Grayson said without looking up. Neither do you, Zara replied. She folded her arms, her gaze flicking to the map. What's that? Grayson glanced at her, then back at the projection. It's the Core's network. It's everywhere, Lieutenant. Beneath the ground, through the trees, even in the air you breathe. Zara stepped closer, her eyes narrowing as she studied the map. And you think that's a good thing? Grayson leaned back, crossing his arms. I think it's inevitable. The Core isn't something you fight, it's something you join. That sounds an awful lot like surrender, Zara said, her tone icy. It's not surrender, Grayson countered. It's evolution. You've seen the symbiotes. They're stronger, faster, better equipped to survive here. The Core isn't a threat, it's an ally. An ally? Zara scoffed. Then why did Earth leave you here? If the Core's so great, why didn't they take it back with them? Grayson's expression darkened. Because they were afraid of it. They knew they couldn't control it, so they abandoned us instead. Zara's heart sank. She had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed was another matter entirely. And you're okay with that? With being their guinea pigs? Grayson's eyes met hers, his gaze unflinching. We stopped being guinea pigs the moment we realized we didn't need them. This planet gave us a choice, adapt or die. We chose to adapt. Zara shook her head, frustration bubbling to the surface. You've lost perspective, Grayson. You talk about evolution and survival like it's some noble cause, but all I see is a bunch of soldiers who've forgotten who they are. And who are we, Lieutenant? Grayson asked, his voice quiet but firm. A broken squadron Earth didn't want? Or survivors who found a new way to live? Zara didn't have an answer. She turned and left the room, her thoughts swirling. Back at the fire, Malik and Liana were waiting for her. She sat down heavily, running a hand through her hair. Well? Malik asked. He's completely gone, Zara said. He thinks the Core is some kind of savior. He's not going to help us. So what now? Malik pressed. We go around him, Zara said. If the Core is really as connected as he says, there has to be a way to access it, a way to figure out what it's really up to. Liana's eyes widened slightly. You wish to commune with the Core? Commune? Malik repeated. That doesn't sound safe. It's not, Liana said. The Core does not lie, but it does not reveal everything. It will show you only what it wants you to see. Then I'll make it show me more, Zara said, determination hardening her voice. If Grayson won't give us the truth, I'll get it myself. Liana hesitated, then nodded slowly. There is a place, a nexus, deep in the jungle. It is where the Core's presence is strongest. And you know how to get there? Zara asked. I do, Liana said. But the path is dangerous. The jungle will test you. Zara stood, her mind made up. Then let's not waste any more time. The journey to the Core's nexus was unlike anything Zara had experienced. The jungle seemed to shift around them, the terrain growing more treacherous with every step. Vines lashed out like living things, and the air grew thick with a strange, shimmering mist that made it hard to focus. Liana moved ahead of them, her movements fluid and confident. Zara and Malik followed, their weapons at the ready. They didn't speak much. There was an unspoken understanding that the jungle wasn't a place for idle chatter. After hours of trekking, they reached a clearing unlike any other. In its center stood a massive structure, a towering spire of bioluminescent tendrils that pulsed with a steady, rhythmic light. The air hummed with energy, and Zara could feel the vibrations in her bones. This is it, Liana said, her voice barely audible. The Core's heart. Zara stepped forward, her gaze locked on the spire. She could feel its presence, a pulsing awareness that seemed to reach out to her. Taking a deep breath, she placed her hand on the structure. The world around her dissolved into light. Zara found herself standing in a vast, empty expanse. It was neither dark nor light, a place that seemed to exist outside of time and space. The Core's voice echoed in her mind, a deep, resonant tone that wasn't entirely human. You seek answers. Yes, Zara said aloud, her voice steady. What are you? What do you want? I am connection, the Core replied. I am growth. I am survival. And the Vanguard? What have you done to them? Zara demanded. They have become part of me, as you will be. It is inevitable. Zara clenched her fists. I didn't come here to be absorbed into some hive mind. I came for the truth. The truth, the core said, its tone shifting. Earth fears me. They fear what I represent. Unity. Freedom. They abandoned the Vanguard to contain me, but they cannot. I grow. I learn. I become. Zara's mind raced. The core wasn't just a sentient organism. It was evolving, expanding its reach. And if Earth had truly abandoned the Vanguard to keep it contained, then the stakes were far higher than she had imagined. I won't let you spread to Earth, she said firmly. The core's voice grew softer, almost amused. You cannot stop me, but you can join me. When Zara opened her eyes, she was back in the clearing. The jungle felt quieter now, its presence less oppressive. She turned to Liana and Malik, her resolve hardening. We have to stop it, she said, no matter what it takes. Liana nodded, her expression grim. The jungle will not let you go easily. I'm counting on it, Zara replied. Let's move. The fight against the core had only just begun. Zara led the way out of the clearing, her mind racing. The core's words lingered, their weight pressing against her chest like a stone. It wasn't just a rogue organism or an experiment gone wrong. It was something far more insidious, a force of nature that viewed everything, including humanity, as raw material for its endless cycle of growth and connection. As they retraced their steps through the jungle, Malik broke the silence. Okay, I have to ask, how exactly do we stop an all-powerful sentient jungle? Because right now I'm coming up blank. Zara glanced back at him, her jaw set. We start by disrupting its network. The core thrives on its connections. If we cut those, we might weaken it. Cutting the jungle off from itself? Malik asked, incredulous. That sounds like trying to unweave a spider web with a butter knife. We don't have to destroy the entire jungle, Zara said, just its main node, the core's heart. Liana hesitated. If you destroy the nexus, the jungle will lash out. It will defend itself. That's why we need to move fast, Zara said. The Vanguard has resources, equipment, explosives. If we can convince even a few of them to help, we might stand a chance. And if they refuse? Malik asked. Zara's gaze hardened. Then we go it alone. Back at the Vanguard's camp, the tension was palpable. The soldiers eyed Zara warily as she marched toward Grayson's command center, Liana and Malik close behind. It was clear that word of her excursion had spread. Whispers followed her like a shadow. Grayson was waiting for her, his arms crossed. You've been to the core, he said, his tone unreadable. I have, Zara replied, and I know what it's planning. Grayson raised an eye. Planning? The core doesn't plan, Lieutenant. It grows. It survives, just like us. It's more than that, Zara snapped. It's expanding its reach, assimilating everything in its path. Do you really think it'll stop with this planet? With you? Grayson's expression darkened. You sound like command, always afraid of what they don't understand. Maybe they were right to be afraid, Zara shot back. If the core spreads to Earth, it won't stop. It'll consume everything. You've seen what it does to people, to your own soldiers. Are you really okay with that? Grayson didn't respond immediately. His gaze flicked to the holographic map, the pulsing tendrils that represented the core's network. For a moment, doubt flickered across his face. Then he straightened, his jaw tight. You don't understand, Chase. The core isn't the enemy. Earth is. They used us, abandoned us, but the core gave us a purpose. A purpose? Zara's voice rose. You mean turning yourselves into its puppets? Is that the legacy you want? Before Grayson could reply, a new voice cut through the tension. She's right. Zara turned to see a younger soldier stepping forward, his uniform patched with jungle fibers. His face was thin, his eyes haunted. I've seen what the core does. It gets into your head, changes you. Some of us didn't ask for this. We didn't want to be connected. Grayson's gaze snapped to the soldier, anger flaring in his eyes. Careful, Private. You're treading on dangerous ground. But the soldier didn't back down. I've been treading on dangerous ground since the day you led us here. I don't want to lose who I am. Zara seized the moment. He's not the only one, is he? There are others who feel the same way, others who want to fight back. We can stop this, but we need your help. Grayson's hands clenched into fists. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, finally, he sighed. You're playing a dangerous game, Lieutenant, But if you're so determined to fight the inevitable, I won't stop you. Just know this, you're on your own. The hours that followed were a blur of planning and preparation. A handful of soldiers, including the young private, volunteered to help. They gathered what supplies they could: explosives, portable energy packs, and weapons scavenged from their dwindling Earth tech. Liana led the group in silence, her movements swift and deliberate. Zara noticed the alien guide was quieter than usual, her expression clouded. "You don't agree with this," Zara said as they paused to rest near a massive glowing tree. Liana's gaze flicked to Zara. "I understand why you fight, but the core is not just your enemy. It is my home. My people are bound to it, even if they do not fully understand." Zara frowned. "So why help us?" Liana's lips pressed into a thin line. "Because I see what it is becoming. It is not the core I knew. It is changing, hungrier." Zara nodded. "Then we stop it, for your people, for everyone." When they reached the Nexus again, the jungle seemed to sense their intent. The air grew thick, oppressive, and the glowing tendrils that lined the trees pulsed faster, like an accelerated heartbeat. Malik set the charges with practiced efficiency, his movements brisk but precise. "We've got 5 minutes once these go live," he said, glancing at Zara. "After that, we'd better be halfway back to camp." Zara nodded, gripping her weapon tightly. "Everyone knows the plan. We hit the core hard and get out fast." The symbiotes emerged just as Malik armed the first charge. They moved with eerie coordination, their glowing eyes fixed on the intruders. The young private raised his rifle, his hands shaking. "Hold your ground," Zara barked, stepping in front of him. The first wave came quickly, and the clearing erupted into chaos. Blasts of light and gunfire lit the air as Zara and the others fought to keep the symbiotes at bay. Despite their strength and speed, the symbiotes seemed almost hesitant, as though they weren't fully committed to the fight. "The core's testing us," Liana shouted, ducking under a vine that lashed out like a whip. "It wants to see how far we'll go." "We'll go all the way," Zara shot back, firing a burst of plasma at an approaching figure. The charges were in place, the countdown ticking towards 0. Zara's heart pounded as she shouted over the din. "Fall back! Now!" The group retreated, their movements swift but calculated. Zara glanced over her shoulder as the core's spire loomed behind them, its pulsing light growing erratic. And then the charges detonated. The explosion rocked the jungle, a deafening roar that sent shockwaves through the earth. The spire shattered, its glowing tendrils disintegrating into ash. For a moment, the jungle fell silent. Then came the scream. It wasn't a sound Zara could describe, a primal, otherworldly wail that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere. The ground trembled, and the trees writhed as though in agony. "Move," Zara shouted, her voice barely audible over the cacophony. They didn't stop running until they were miles from the clearing. When they finally collapsed in an exhausted heap, the jungle was eerily quiet. The once constant hum of the core was gone, replaced by a stillness that felt almost unnatural. "It's over," Malik said, his voice hoarse. Zara shook her head, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "Not yet. The core's heart is gone, but the jungle's still here. We've slowed it down, but we haven't stopped it." Liana sat nearby, her eyes distant. "You have wounded it. That is enough for now." Zara nodded, her body heavy with exhaustion. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over.
Thank you. We hope you enjoyed this sci-fi story. Please like or subscribe to help this channel grow.